The palace where Prince Vashagan had grown up gleamed with gold, marble, and heavy fabrics. Yet with each passing year, it seemed more confining to him. In the throne room, the councillors' robes rustled softly, and the chains on their ceremonial belts chimed. While at the long table, his father and mother calmly discussed his future, as though it had already been written in a book. And all that remained was to turn the pages. They named the daughters of neighbouring kings and counted lands, caravans, gold, and old family ties. To the court, Vashagan's marriage was a convenient seal upon a treaty between kingdoms. He listened in silence. There was neither petulance in him, nor contempt for his duties. Yet he felt stifled. He did not yet know whom he would one day love. But he clearly felt one thing. He wanted to live his own life, not receive it ready-made from someone else's hands. For the first time in a long while, Vashagan felt free during a hunt. He urged his horse faster than he should have, and soon the pounding hooves of his retinue faded far behind him. Hot and dusty, he rode into the village of Hatsik, lying beneath the white noonday sun. A spring murmured beside the road. Several girls stood nearby with clay pitchers. Vashagan dismounted and asked for water. One of the girls, Anahit, the daughter of a shepherd, looked at him calmly. She neither bowed nor fussed over him. She lifted the first pitcher and slowly poured the cold water onto the scorching ground beside his boots. The dust darkened and hissed softly. Then she emptied the second vessel in the same way. Only then did Anahit fill a pitcher again and hold it out to him. The damp clay cooled his palms. Vashagan drank in small sips and suddenly realized that she had cooled not only his thirst, but also the hot-headedness with which he had galloped there. For the first time that day, he was in no hurry to go anywhere. Vashagan lowered the pitcher and frowned. He was accustomed to servants hurrying to carry out an order at his first word, and the girl's calm deliberation struck him as insolence. "Why did you pour out the water when I asked for a drink?" he demanded sharply. Anahit did not look away. "You are overheated, traveller. Your blood is still boiling from the ride. If you had drunk icy water at once, you might have fallen gravely ill. I poured it out so that you would have time to cool down and catch your breath." Vashagan's anger vanished as quickly as though cool water had been splashed over it as well. Before him stood a girl who was not afraid of his irritation and did not try to please him. She spoke simply and without flattery, as she would to any weary traveller whose health mattered more than his impatience. No one in the palace ever spoke to him that way, and that impressed him even more than her beauty. Fashagan thanked Anahit, watered his horse, and returned to the palace by evening. Everything there remained the same. The gold on the walls, the servants' quiet footsteps, the counselors' cautious voices. But now all that familiar luxury seemed especially empty to him. At supper, he barely listened to the conversation. He kept seeing Hatzik, the scorching dust, the cold water, and the steady gaze of the girl who felt no fear of his name. She had seen in him neither a prince nor a future ruler, nor a profitable part of an alliance, but merely a tired man who might be harmed by haste. And the more Fashagan thought about it, the clearer his feelings became. All the courtesy of the palace suddenly paled beside that simple human concern at the spring. That night, he understood that he would seek no other bride. Fashagan did not want to delay. The very next morning, he summoned Nazar, his most faithful servant, and ordered him to set out for Hatzik. Nazar did not arrive at the home of the shepherd Aaron empty-handed. Behind him came servants carrying costly fabrics, silverware, jewelry, and a chest of gold, everything befitting a royal proposal of marriage. Entering the modest, sturdy house, he bowed to its master and respectfully asked for Anahit's hand on behalf of Prince Fashagan. Nazar expected amazement, tears of joy, and gratitude for such an honor. But Aaron merely looked calmly at the lavish gifts. "My daughter is not a possession for me to give away," he said. "Her fate belongs to her alone. If the prince wishes to take her as his wife, let him ask her." And for the first time, Nazar understood that in this simple home, a person's will was valued more highly than royal gold. Nazar left Aran's house, still surprised by his answer, and asked where he might find Anahit. He was directed to a broad yard behind the house, where village children sat beneath the dense crown of an old tree. Anahit was among them. She was patiently showing one boy how to form a letter more evenly on a wax tablet, guiding his hand with a light touch of her fingers. Nearby, two girls sorted colored woolen threads on a small loom, while Anahit explained which thread to lift and which to let pass. The wood creaked softly, the wool rustled, and letters were repeated in hushed voices. Nazar stopped at a distance. He had expected to see a shepherd's daughter overwhelmed by news of the prince. But instead, he saw a person around whom a little world of her own already existed. A calm, useful, orderly world. Everyone there was occupied with some task and felt needed. For the first time, Nazar understood why her father had spoken with such confidence. Nazar approached Anahit, bowed, and delivered Prince Fashagan's proposal. He spoke solemnly, already expecting to see joy upon her face. But Anahit did not abandon her work. She calmly finished the row on the little loom, straightened a woolen thread, and only then raised her eyes. "I thank him for the honor," she said, "but I cannot accept this proposal." Nazar froze. Refuse a prince, the future ruler of the kingdom? Anahit seemed to read his thoughts. Tell your master that I will not marry a man who knows only how to hunt and command the labor of others. A person who knows no craft does not know the true value of labor. And without understanding labor, it is difficult to understand the value of life itself. There was neither defiance nor pride in her voice. She said it simply, as though stating a rule long proven by time. And Nazar understood that neither gold nor title would make her abandon her conviction. Anahit noticed how shaken Nazar was and spoke more gently. Do not think that I wish to humiliate the prince. Title and wealth are like the wind. They are beside you today and may vanish tomorrow. A king can lose his throne, a rich man all his gold. But what a person has learned to do with his own hands will remain with him even in misfortune. She ran her palm along the smooth edge of the little loom and added, Tell Vashagan that I will agree to become his wife if he masters a true craft. Not as a test, and not for the sake of my pride. I want to know that the man beside me can make something useful himself, and will not be lost if one day neither servants nor palace are there. Nazar listened in silence. Now Anahit's condition seemed to him not insolence, but concern for a future that no one but her had yet been able to foresee. Nazar returned to the palace with a heavy heart and conveyed Anahit's answer to Vashagan. The moment he finished, an indignant murmur swept through the throne room. The councillors reddened, exchanged glances, and called the shepherd girl's words insolence and an insult to the crown. Punish her, came a cry from among the courtiers. But Vashagan raised a hand, and the hall fell silent. There was no anger on his face. On the contrary, he smiled, calmly and almost joyfully. While others heard humiliation in Anahit's words, he heard the truth. She had not demanded the impossible of him. She had merely shown him something he had never noticed before. His entire life was surrounded by the labor of others. Yet he himself did not know how to create anything. She is right, Vashagan said. I accept her condition. From this day forward, I will learn a craft. And for the first time, the path he had chosen truly belonged to him alone. That same day, Vashagan chose weaving, the very craft Anahit taught to the village children. A large wooden loom was installed in his chambers, and the oldest and most skillful weaver in the palace became his teacher. From the first lessons, the loom seemed to be testing the prince. The heavy shuttle knocked dully against the frame. The treadles creaked beneath his feet, and the threads whispered as they slipped between his fingers. The wool, dyed with herbs and roots, smelled of dry meadows, but the beauty of the craft came through pain. The coarse yarn cut his unaccustomed hands, blood welled on his fingers, and the fine silk threads tangled and snapped. Fashigan grew angry with himself, began again and again, and could not find the proper rhythm. At times the loom seemed unbearably slow. At others it demanded such speed that his thoughts could not keep pace with his hands. The old master patiently corrected every mistake without a needless word. And still, each evening, the prince remained with him longer than he had the day before. Months passed. Fashigan studied every day and asked the old master for neither indulgence nor praise. Sometimes the pattern came out uneven and the threads went awry, forcing him to undo several hours of work. The prince would sigh heavily, gather the yarn, and sit down at the loom once more. Gradually, his fingers ceased to hurry. The shuttle settled confidently into his palm. His movements became fluid, and the measured beat of the loom no longer irritated him, but soothed him. Now Fashigan was beginning to understand Anahit's words. Every piece of fabric concealed hours of concentration, patience, weary eyes, and precise hands. He no longer saw merely a carpet or a garment, but someone's life woven among the threads. And as his skill changed, so did he. He became more patient, attentive, and calm. Thus labor taught the prince the value of things better than dozens of palace tutors ever had. Exactly 1 year later, Fashigan removed his finest work from the loom. Before him lay a length of the most delicate cloth, light, even, and woven with such precision that not a single thread strayed from the pattern. The colours he had chosen were not the loud and lavish colours of the palace, but deep, tranquil shades, like the shadow of a tree, dry earth, and cool spring water. Fashigan gazed at the fabric for a long time, remembering the first cuts on his fingers, the tangled threads, and the months of patience. Then he rolled it up carefully. He attached no letter, no royal seal, and no oath. He knew now that true work spoke for its maker, and Anahit would be able to read this silent message. At dawn, Fashigan summoned Nazar and ordered him to take the fabric to Hatzik. Woven into it was an entire year of his labor, and the answer to the condition that had once changed his life. A year later, Nazar rode into Hatzik once more and stopped at the familiar house of Aaron the shepherd. This time, however, no servants followed him with chests of gold, and no foreign fabrics or jewels glittered behind him. In his hands, he held only a single neatly wrapped bundle. He found Anahit in the yard. As before, she was occupied with her work, calmly sorting the threads at a small loom. Nazar approached and bowed to her more deeply than he had the first time. Now his bow expressed not only respect for the prince's possible bride, but also sincere admiration for her wisdom. Without a word, he held out the bundle. "This is the answer of my master, Prince Vashagan, to your condition," Nazar said. He added nothing more. Grand speeches would have been out of place. Anahit accepted the bundle carefully, and for a moment the yard itself seemed to fall silent in expectation. Anahit slowly unfolded the bundle, and the room grew so quiet that only the faint rustle of the cloth could be heard. She did not admire the gift as one admires something costly. Her fingers glided over the surface, testing the evenness of the tension, the density of the weave, and the precision of every edge. Then Anahit raised the cloth to the light and studied its restrained, intricate pattern for a long while. To her, it spoke more clearly than any letter. In the even threads she saw months of patience, sleepless evenings, pricked fingers, and mistakes that had to be unravelled and begun again. She also saw what gold could never buy: pride overcome, discipline, and true mastery. Anahit's face gradually brightened. Vashagan had not asked a craftsman to do the work for him, nor had he tried to deceive her with beautiful words. He had truly changed himself. She passed her palm over the cloth once more and smiled softly. Her answer to the prince was now perfectly clear. Anahit ran her hand over Vashagan's fabric once more, rolled it up carefully, and pressed it to her chest. A gentle, warm smile touched her lips, but she said nothing aloud. Instead of answering, Anahit rose and went into the workshop. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a heavy carpet that she herself had woven over many long evenings. Its pattern intertwined the deep colours of earth, grass, and the evening sky, and every line was measured with a master's precision. She handed the carpet to Nazar. "Take this to your master," was all Anahit said. Nazar understood everything without explanation. This was more than a gift in return. The carpet was her consent, her quiet yes, spoken in a language the two of them now understood. Vashagan had proved that he had become a master, and Anahit answered him as an equal. When Nazar returned to the palace and unrolled Anahit's carpet before Vashagan, the prince understood her answer at once. He gazed at the pattern for a long time, recognizing in every line the patience of hands he knew, and his heart filled with a quiet, profound joy. The wedding took place soon afterward, but it was nothing like the lavish palace celebrations once prepared for advantageous alliances. There were no endless toasts, no recitations of lands, gold, and the antiquity of noble families. Relatives, friends, craftspeople, and the people of Hatzik gathered in a bright hall. Vashagan and Anahit stood side by side, calm and certain. Those before the gathering were no longer a prince and a shepherd's daughter, but two equals, each of whom knew the value of the other's labor. They were joined neither by profit nor by another's will. Over that year, they themselves had woven the foundation of their future, from respect, patience, and trust. The years passed. Time slowly changed the palace and the kingdom. The old councillors turned grey, children grew, and masters passed their crafts on to apprentices. The day came when the former king and queen passed quietly and honourably from life, leaving power to Vashagan and Anahit. Now mature, they accepted the crown, not as a privilege, but as a grave duty. Vashagan remembered the long hours at the loom and knew how much labour was hidden in every simple thing. Anahit, meanwhile, never forgot the village yard, the children, the shepherds, and the workshops of Hatzig. Their decisions were therefore rarely born of whim. They listened to craftspeople, protected farmers, and ensured that the laws were fair to rich and poor alike. Under their rule, the kingdom lived without fear. The fields yielded crops, the roads were safe, and a person's labour was valued more highly than grand titles. Upon becoming queen, Anahit did not turn into a silent ornament of the throne. Costly gowns and lavish feasts interested her far less than the lives of the people beyond the palace walls. She sat beside Vashagan at councils of state, listened attentively to the nobles, and rarely spoke first. But when arguments became entangled in ambition, profit, and court intrigue, her quiet voice returned the discussion to what mattered. Whom would the decision help, and whom would it harm? At times, one simple question from Anahit demolished a cunning scheme over which the councillors had argued for hours. Vashagan remembered that clear gaze at the spring and had long since learned to trust her insight. In the most difficult matters, he often asked her first, "And what do you think?" Anahit answered honestly, even when her opinion contradicted his own. Thus the mind of a shepherd's daughter, which had once changed one prince, now served an entire kingdom. Even wise rule could not protect the palace from the quietest danger of all, flattery. Anahit noticed it before anyone else. With each passing year, more and more people around Vashagan learned to guess which words would sound most pleasing to royal ears. Ministers reported abundant harvests, governors assured him that the people were content, and courtiers vied with one another in proclaiming universal prosperity. And yet, Anahit heard an alarming false note in those speeches. The reports were too polished, the praises too much alike. Other news reached her as well. Distant villages lacked grain. Certain governors collected excessive taxes, and the grievances of ordinary people sometimes never reached the capital. She saw a soft web gradually being spun around the throne. It neither choked nor frightened. On the contrary, it caressed the ear. But that was precisely what made it so dangerous. Anahit understood that if Vashagan heard only pleasing truths, one day he would cease to know his own kingdom. One evening, after yet another splendid reception had ended and the doors had closed behind the last courtier, Anahit remained alone with Vachagan. "Be wary, my king," she said quietly. "It is far too easy for a palace to mistake the people's obedient silence for their peace." Vachagan looked at her closely. A king who does not see the lives of his subjects with his own eyes rules not a country, but only his palace and his ministers' illusions. Take off your crown for a time. Dress as an ordinary merchant or traveller. Leave your guards behind and go where no one will recognize you. She spoke not as a subject, but as his closest and most honest friend. Listen to what people say at markets, in workshops, and in villages when no royal officials are near. Only then will you learn the truth that cannot be heard from a throne. Vachagan was silent for a long time. Then he nodded. The advice was difficult, and therefore right. Vachagan did not postpone acting upon Anahit's counsel. He knew the value of her words too well, and understood that the truth about the kingdom could not be seen from the window of a palace carriage. Late that night, he took off his embroidered silk garments and left behind his rings and emblems of royal power. In their place, he donned the plain but sturdy robe of a travelling merchant. In a small satchel, he placed a little money, a change of clothing, and enough bread for the first days of the journey. Only Anahit and his two most trusted servants, disguised as drovers, knew of his departure. Vachagan wished neither to alarm the court nor to give the ministers time to prepare a beautiful lie for him. At dawn, the three travellers slipped unnoticed out of the capital. The crown remained in the palace, while ahead lay dusty roads, villages, and unfamiliar faces. For the first time, Vachagan was setting out to look upon his kingdom not through the eyes of a ruler, but through those of an ordinary man. Travelling through distant villages, Vachagan saw what had been absent from the reports at court. Impoverished settlements, neglected roads, and officials demanding extra payment. With each day, his resolve grew stronger to return and correct what the court preferred to conceal. But one day, the small caravan he had joined entered a narrow mountain gorge. Stones suddenly rained down from above. Shouts echoed between the cliffs, and bandits leaped onto the road. Everything happened too quickly. Several guards were disarmed. The rest fled. Vachagan tried to fight back, but without his sword and royal guard, he proved as vulnerable as any traveller. He was knocked to the ground, bound and searched. Judging by his well-made clothes, the bandits decided that their captive was a wealthy merchant. They exchanged satisfied glances. Such a man could command a handsome ransom. Thus the king, who had set out to seek the truth about his realm, found himself at the mercy of its lawlessness. Vashagan was blindfolded and led for a long time along narrow mountain paths. Stones crunched beneath his feet. The cold wind gave way to clammy heat, until at last he was stopped and the blindfold removed. Before him opened a vast cavern. Water dripped from the vaults, and the air smelled of smoke, wet stone, and old clothing. Near the entrance, a dark lake glimmered faintly. Its shores curved in an unusual shape, a long crescent of a young moon encircled by black cliffs. Several fires burned deep inside the cavern. Dozens of captives crowded around them, merchants, craftspeople, and peasants. The emaciated people sat in silence, warming their hands over the feeble flames and trying not to meet the bandits' eyes. Vashagan was shoved roughly toward the others. No one there knew that a king stood before them. For the first time in his life, his title meant absolutely nothing. Vashagan's eyes gradually adjusted to the gloom. He studied the captives' faces, weary, gaunt, and nearly devoid of hope. Then suddenly he froze. In a far corner, an old man was repairing cracked horse tack. His hands trembled with age, but worked with confidence. Vashagan recognized Nazar, the faithful servant who had disappeared many years before while carrying out an errand. Their eyes met. Nazar gave the faintest shake of his head. Say nothing. Before long, Vashagan overheard the bandits talking and learned the terrible rule of that place. No one there asked about title or birth. Only those who proved useful were kept alive. Blacksmiths, carpenters, saddlers, and other skilled workers. The rest were merely a needless burden to the gang. Then the words Anahit had spoken long ago in Hatsik returned to him with frightening clarity. His crown was worthless here. His royal name could not save him. Only one thing could: the skill of his own hands. In the morning, the bandit chief slowly walked among the new captives, deciding which of them deserved to remain alive. When he reached Vashagan, he seized his hands, inspected his palms closely, and sneered with contempt. "You do not look like a craftsman, merchant, and we feed no one here for nothing. What can you make with your own hands? Answer, or you will become food for the fish in the lake." Vashagan felt everything inside him turn cold. This was the very moment Anahit had warned him of so many years ago. Should he declare himself king? Here that could only doom him or turn him into a captive for whom they would demand ransom without end. Neither army, nor wealth, nor name could help him now. He slowly lifted his eyes to the chief. "I am a weaver, Vashagan said calmly. And I can prove it with my work. Vashagan straightened, forcing himself not to show his fear. I am no ordinary weaver, he said evenly. I can create cloth of such fineness and beauty that its method of manufacture is known to me alone. The chief narrowed his eyes, and Vashagan continued. Any queen would pay you a sack of gold for a small length of such fabric. Kill me, and you will lose a fortune that is walking straight into your hands. He spoke calmly, knowing exactly where to aim his words. A familiar gleam of greed was already kindling in the bandit's eyes. The chief remained silent for several moments more, torn between his habitual cruelty and the promise of easy profit. At last he smirked. Very well, weaver. You may live for now, but if you have lied, you will regret it. Vashagan bowed his head. The first step had been taken. He had bought himself time, not with gold or a royal name, but with skill and intelligence. The bandits did not delay. The promise of gold proved more effective than any command. Within a few days, they brought a roughly built loom from the nearest town, along with fine silk and gold thread, the best they had been able to obtain. The loom was set up in a far corner of the cave. Above it, a small oil lamp smoked, casting quivering light upon the wet stone walls. Vashagan sat on a low bench and placed his palms upon the rough wood. Once those hands had worn royal rings and touched precious fabrics in the palace. Now he was surrounded by damp, cold, and armed bandits. But he felt no humiliation. The crude loom seemed to him not an instrument of captivity, but a road to freedom. Fine threads once again lay between his fingers, and for the first time since his capture, Vashagan felt genuine hope. Vashagan began to weave. In the stillness of the cave, the shuttle beat steadily, the treadles creaked, and the taut threads rustled. That peaceful rhythm reminded him of the palace workshop and seemed to stretch a slender thread all the way back home. But now every line of the pattern carried a double meaning. By alternating colors, changing the direction of the weave, and leaving barely perceptible breaks in the symmetry, Vashagan composed a secret message in a language that only two people could read, he and Anahit. Through the threads, he revealed that he was alive but held captive, and that faithful Nazar was beside him. Then, in the very center of the cloth, he wove the principal sign. A dark lake, shaped like the crescent of a young moon, confined between tall black cliffs. For hours the bandits watched the swift movements of his fingers. They marveled at the gleam of the gold and the intricacy of the ornament, imagining sacks of future coins. None of them understood that the beautiful cloth had already become a plea for rescue and a map to their secret refuge that would one day lead there the very people they feared. At last the work was finished. Vashagan removed the shimmering cloth from the loom and handed it to the bandit chief. The chief unfurled it before the fire. The gold threads flared in the trembling light, and the silk shimmered softly with every movement. The bandits crowded close, running rough fingers over the pattern, estimating its weight, and already arguing over how much gold they could obtain for it. No one noticed the secret signs. "You did not deceive us, merchant," the chief said with a satisfied grin. "They will heap out its weight in gold for a thing like this. You will live as long as you can weave more of the same." Vashagan merely bowed his head calmly. He watched as the cloth was carefully rolled up and hidden away for sale. The bandits saw wealth in it. He saw the only way out of the cave. Slender, fragile, and already setting off to meet Anahit. The chief chose 2 of his most cunning men and ordered them to travel to the capital. The bandits dressed in the rich garments of foreign merchants, concealed weapons beneath their cloaks, and carefully placed the precious cloth inside an ornate bundle. On the road, they were already dividing the future profit. Such a thing, they decided, could not be offered at an ordinary market. There could be only one buyer for it: the royal court. At the palace gates, the bandits carried themselves with confidence and importance. "We have bought a marvel worthy of Queen Anahit's own eyes," one of them announced to the guards. "No other fabric like it exists anywhere." The guards exchanged glances. Gold thread glinted through the folds of the bundle, and the merchant's story sounded convincing enough. Before long, news of the extraordinary wares was passing through the palace corridors. The bandits did not suspect that they themselves had brought Anahit the first true clue to her missing husband. Vashagan's long absence had left Anahit worn with worry. Thus, when she was told of foreign merchants with a rare cloth, she agreed to view their wares almost indifferently. In the throne room, the bandits pompously unfurled the cloth directly upon the marble floor. The courtiers gasped. The gold threads glimmered, and the intricate pattern shimmered in the window light. But Anahit did not say a word. She stood motionless as the color slowly drained from her face. Stepping closer, the queen ran her fingers along the selvage. That tension of the threads, that almost invisible knot. She herself had once helped Vashagan master such a technique. No one else could have woven in precisely that way. Anahit's heart beat faster. She was no longer looking at the beauty of the cloth. Her eyes moved from symbol to symbol, noticing repetitions, breaks in the symmetry, and alternations of color. Gradually, the pattern ceased to be an ornament. A letter unfolded before her. Among the golden threads, she seemed to hear Vashagan's quiet, desperate voice. Her husband was alive, and he was calling to her for help. To Anahit, the pattern was no longer a mystery. The repeated signs, colors, and broken symmetry formed a clear message. Vashagan was alive. He was a captive. Nazar was beside him, and they must be sought in a cave by a dark lake shaped like the crescent of a young moon. Anahit's heart pounded with horror and relief, but her face remained calm. "Beautiful work," she said coldly to the merchants. The treasurer will pay you as much gold as this cloth weighs." The bandits could barely conceal their delight. "And if you can find this craftsman again, bring me more of his work. I will reward you generously." They bowed and left, certain that they had made the best bargain of their lives. Anahit waited until the doors had closed, and only then quietly ordered the captain of the guard, "Follow them. Do not let them out of your sight for a single step." Vashagan's rescue had begun. As soon as the doors closed behind the bandits, Anahit sprang into action. She did not convene a large council of war or raise the entire army. Too much commotion could warn the enemy and doom the captives. The queen secretly summoned the captain of the guard and ordered him to select several dozen of the most experienced warriors, loyal and patient people who knew how to move in silence. Before them, Anahit spread out Vashagan's cloth and pointed to the principal sign. "Search the wild mountains for a dark lake shaped like the crescent of a young moon. The cave must be nearby." Then she removed her palace gown, put on plain traveling clothes and a cloak, and tightened her belt. The captain of the guard tried to object, but Anahit only shook her head. "Vashagan came for me himself when he had to prove his love. Now it is my turn to go after him." Before dawn, the small company had already left the capital. Anahit's company travelled with almost no rest. Scouts who had secretly followed the bandits from the capital rode ahead, and guided by their signs, the horsemen passed ever deeper into the wild mountains. By twilight, the road narrowed between black cliffs. Anahit raised her hand, and the company stopped. Below lay a lake, dark, deep, and curved in the exact crescent of a young moon. She recognized it immediately. This was the very curve Vashagan had woven into the golden pattern of his message. There could be no doubt now. Beyond a ridge of stone, the scouts noticed a narrow cave entrance. Anahit ordered everyone to dismount. Swords were drawn soundlessly from their sheaths. The horses were led away, and the warriors, dividing into groups, silently surrounded the cliffs. Now they had only to wait for the depths of night. Anahit looked at the black water and knew that somewhere very near, beyond that wall of stone, Vashagan was still waiting for her. Deep in the night, when the bandits, celebrating their successful sail, had grown drunk and fallen asleep beside the dying fires, Anahit gave the signal. The warriors entered the cave without a sound. One by one, they took the weapons from the sleepers, bound their hands, and blocked the exits. Several bandits managed to leap up, but their resistance was extinguished before the sound of battle could spread through the cavern. Anahit was already running forward with a torch. Its light glided over the wet walls and the frightened faces of the captives, then suddenly stopped. Vashagan sat beside the crude loom. He was gaunt and exhausted, but alive. Old Nazar rose beside him. For several moments, the husband and wife simply looked at each other, as though unable to believe that the distance between them had finally vanished. Anahit approached and took Fashagan's hands in hers. "I read your letter," she said quietly. He smiled. That night, not only the king and Nazar received their freedom. The guards cut the bonds of every captive. Fashagan returned to the palace, not as an invincible warrior, but as a man who had seen how helpless power could be in the face of true disaster. He assembled the courtiers and told them everything without concealment. "In that cave, my crown was worth less than dirt," the king said. "Two things saved me: the craft Anahit once made me learn, and her wisdom, which enabled her to read my work." The bandits received a just punishment. The freed captives returned home, and old Nazar was richly rewarded for his loyalty and courage. Afterward, Fashagan and Anahit ruled together for many more years, in trust, respect, and love. And in their kingdom, a simple truth was passed down from one generation to the next. Gold can be lost, a title taken away, power destroyed. But knowledge and skill gained through one's own labor remain with a person and make that person truly strong and free.